Visual novel is a debut title from LegendOri Productions, an ambitious sci-fi thriller starring Blake, a man who works for a big tech company in some kind of future metropolis. When booting up the game, there's a warning the game features around some mental health, violence, and destructive behaviours, with some themes, images, and language used that may be disturbing or triggering to some players. It's worth noting that from the very beginning of the game, there is some suicidal imagery, and that imagery persists throughout the 2 hours I spent with the game. Behind that initial barrier, though, stands a group of interesting and well-designed characters, and some genuinely solid writing that could have done with being a little bit longer, or at least providing a more concrete ending scene, with closure surrounding our main characters and supporting cast. As a visual novel, the gameplay elements are light. You can make choices throughout the game which affects how the supporting cast react to you. If you're nice to people, they'll want to spend a bit more time with you, and if you're not, then they'll alienate themselves from you a bit. But this doesn't really affect the game's story, though there are some choices, particularly to the end, that do change the lives of some of the cast members surrounding you. There are a few minigame style things scattered throughout too, including using your real life phone to translate some binary, making a cocktail for divination, and an unusual counting game with a dog, which you can pet. There's a lot to like about Blake, whether it's the interesting, almost Orwellian-inspired story being told, or the unique, somewhat diverse cast on offer. Not to spoil anything about the story, but the focus on mental health issues within the game explores far more than the typical depression you might usually think. And while there is a bit of conversation surrounding the typical day-to-day malaise, it's more a story about lost family. Sadly, while there is a lot to like, Blake doesn't come off as an altogether completed story. The game itself is nicely polished and there are no issues there, but the story just kind of ends abruptly, putting our lead character in an interesting situation, perhaps as a way to set up a sequel. You learn a lot of things about the characters throughout the story, and all of their individual tales just stop. There's a character in particular named Hari, who I found very interesting after seeing the optional scenes with her, that I'd like to know more about, but it's not just Hari. All of the characters more or less disappear with no explanation and no reaction, bar one. It leaves the experience feeling a little empty, cut off with no resolution. Despite this one issue with the game's story, what's given is very promising. An interesting sci-fi story based in mental health, using some classic sci-fi themes. LegendOri Productions has managed to create an interesting world and a good cast of characters I want to see more of and spend more time with, but sadly that time is cut short. It goes to show how good a debut Blake is that my only real complaint is that I wanted more. But that longing for more feels like Blake was an exciting introduction into a bigger game that had just ended as it was getting good. It's frustrating, but hopefully there's more in the works. As a solo title, I'm torn on the whole thing, but as an introduction for more to come, it's definitely struck a chord. While the promise for the title is there, it unfortunately doesn't last long enough for the game to be truly something special. Unfortunately, as there's no plans for a sequel announced, you may find yourself a bit underwhelmed by the ending of the game.